Hi, I'm Dion Tracy Duckett, estate planning and elder law attorney for Duckett Law LLC. And in this video, I am discussing choosing your agents in your estate plan. So, first, we want to talk about the types of agents that may be involved in your estate plan. If you have a trust, those agents who you designate to manage the property in your trust are referred to as trustees. In your advance directive for healthcare, your healthcare agent is the person you designate to make healthcare decisions for you in the event that you are unable to communicate those healthcare decisions on your own. The financial power of attorney, the agent is referred to as either an agent or an attorney in fact. And that person is designated to manage property. So that's property that is not in the trust. And so that can be bank accounts, real estate or other property. But typically, if you're using a trust, most of your property will be in the trust, and the financial power of attorney allows the agent to manage things like your mail and bill paying and that type of thing. And then finally, there's the will. In the will, your agent is the executor, who is also sometimes referred to as the personal representative. And that is the person who will wrap up your affairs. They will be responsible for administering your estate. So, when it comes to choosing your healthcare agents, the things that you need to consider are first, to select someone who knows what your wishes are. And then, if they know what your wishes are, you want to make sure they will be someone who will honor your wishes. And then you want to also select someone who is willing to serve. And you also always want to select a backup. The example that I like to use is my parents. My father was a medical doctor, and my mother believed in natural cures. And so some people called her a witch doctor. And so if you are somebody who believes in all of the advances of medicine, then you might want someone like my father as your agent. And that doesn't mean that he would not honor your wishes if you wanted more natural and homeopathic remedies. But you want to make sure. And so, on the other hand, someone like my mother would she was deathly afraid of surgery. And so she wouldn't select surgery necessarily as the option unless it was an absolute necessity. So you want to select someone who knows what your wishes are and will honor your wishes, and someone who is willing to serve. And then you will also name backups in case that person, things change sometimes, and so you need to have someone in place if that person is unable to serve. When it comes to choosing your property agents, those are the trustees, executors, and attorneys in facts or agents under the financial power of attorney. You want to select someone who's financially responsible. If they're bad with their own credit, they'll probably be bad with yours. If they spend too much of their own money, they'll probably spend too much of yours. You also want to select someone who's trustworthy and someone who's willing to serve. The example that I always like to use was a client that I had many, many years ago. She came to my office and she said, I want my brother to be my agent. And for all of her finances. And so when I drafted the documents and sent them to her, her daughter saw the documents and her feelings were hurt. So my client came back to me and said, take my brother off and make my daughter my agent on the power of attorney. And so we did that. And then, as soon as the power of attorney was in place, the daughter started spending my client's money. But she wasn't spending it for my client. She was fixing up my client's house, but not for my client. My client was elderly. So the daughter was fixing up the house using my client's money to fix up the house for after the client had passed. And then the daughter took that power of attorney and co-signed my client's name to the grandchild's student loans. Now that was not legal, but the way to enforce that is a lawsuit, and my client was not going to sue her daughter. And so my client came back to me and said, revoke that power of attorney and put my brother back in place. And so I always tell this story because often when I tell the story, my clients say, well, wait a minute, the person who I said I need to change. So use that as you should know who you're selecting and make sure there's somebody responsible. And if you don't know anybody, there are professionals who can serve in these roles. And then I want to talk about fiduciary obligations. So all of the agents that we mentioned before are fiduciaries. And what that means is that they have a legal duty to act in your best interest. Or if it's a trust that you've set up for someone else, or they have a legal responsibility to act in the best interest of the beneficiary. So you want to choose wisely, and we've talked about the factors that you should consider. So let me tell you about the legal duties. They have a duty of care. That means they must take reasonable steps to avoid causing harm to you or your property or to the beneficiary and the property. They have a duty of loyalty. They must put your interest above personal interest, of their personal interest when it comes to managing your property. They have a duty of good faith. They must act honestly, prudently, and with care. And then there's the duty of confidentiality. They must keep your information confidential and not use it for their own personal gain. And so keep in mind that these are legal obligations. But that does not mean appoint someone who's irresponsible or not trustworthy, because it may break the law for them to violate these responsibilities, but then the damage is done and the lawsuit might cost more than what you're protecting. So I hope you'll find this video informative and instructional when it comes to choosing the agents for your estate plan.